if you have ever been in my grade 9 or 10 classes, and I don't think any of you have, I give the line review, this review every single year. If I see you in grade 12, you're probably going to get it again because it kind of reviews everything we have ever learned about the line. So let's just go through it. I will go through it at a little bit of a quicker speed because you did learn it in grade 9 and you did review it in grade 10. So by grade 11, if you don't understand something, I hope that you're going to go and try to learn it yourself, but I will address as many topics as possible. So first of all, this is the Cartesian coordinate system. We have our x-axis this way, our y-axis this way, 0, 0 is the origin. Whenever you have a coordinate point, the first point tells you your x, so it tells you how much you're moving to the right or to the left. And your second point tells you your y, it tells you how much you're going up or down. Forms of the equation of a line. So we've learned two different types of lines, or two different types of ways you can write an equation of a line. The first one is standard form, and standard form looks like that over there. And that's when you have the x written first, then the y, then the constant is equal to 0. And there are three specific rules for writing a line in standard form. They are the a value must be positive, a, b, and c can't be fractions or decimals, and the equation has to be in this order. Now, that being said, you don't need all three of those terms in order for it to be in standard form. You can have just the x and y, or just the x and the constant, or just the y and the constant. The other form is in slope-intercept form, most famously known as y is equal to mx plus b. In this form, the m stands for slope and the b stands for the y-intercept. Now, using these forms are really useful for different things, and often you're asked questions like, what is the slope? What is the y-intercept? What is the x-intercept? So we're going to try to go through all of those. But the one thing I did want to tell you before we go to the next page is when something is in standard form, the y-intercept can be figured out using that formula, negative c over b, and the slope can be figured out using the formula negative a over b. Have you guys ever seen those before? You may not have. So just keep those in mind. You could always just change something from standard form to y is equal to mx plus b form, but there are shortcuts to help you figure out those two things. So let's try a couple of examples. I have this entire booklet split up into in-class examples, which we'll do together. And then anywhere it says homework examples, those are the ones you guys are going to try yourself. So question number 1 says rewrite blah, blah, blah in standard form, and then determine the slope and the y-intercept. So we're really changing gears. We were doing everything like radical, and now it's mostly algebra. So I'm going to rewrite this question. Negative 2 over 3y is equal to negative 2 over 4x plus 5. I know in standard form, you cannot have any fractions. So the first thing I want to do is, because this is an equation, I want to multiply by the magic number to get rid of all of the fractions. What would be the magic number in this case? Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and multiply every single term by 12. And when I do that, I'm going to get negative 24 over 3, which is just going to give me negative 8y. This is negative 24 over 6, which is negative 6x. And 12 times 5 is just going to be a 60. Question? Okay, now we need to rearrange this equation so everything is on one side. And when we do that, we also want the x to be positive. So it just makes sense to move the negative 6x and the 60 over to the other side so that we can accomplish that. So negative 6x is going to become positive 6x. 8y is going to remain negative 8y. And positive 60 is going to become negative 60. And this is our answer in standard form. Okay, here's our chance to practice some of those equations on the other page. We're trying to figure out the slope. When something is in standard form, the slope can be easily determined by using m is equal to negative a over b. How do the letters work? Well, this is your a, this is your b, and this is your c. And you also have to keep in mind the negatives that come along with it. So a is 6, b is negative 8, and c is negative 60. So when I just plug in those numbers, I'm going to get negative 6 over negative 8, and that's going to reduce to 2 over 3. 3 over I totally messed that up. Okay, using our formula for y-intercept, it's going to be negative c over b. And again, if you're wondering where I'm getting the formulas from, just on the previous page, they were in the boxes over there. So again, be mindful that this formula does have a negative sign within it. So sometimes you might have like double negatives that you have to be careful of. Negative and c is negative 60. B is negative 8. So this is going to reduce to 15 over negative 2. Question number 2, rewrite blah, blah, blah in slope-intercept form. So now we want to get into y is equal to mx plus b form. And then from there, determine the slope and the y-intercept. All right, now keep in mind, you guys, for slope-intercept form, you can have fractions, you can have negative numbers. The only key point is the y needs to be all by itself. So what I'm going to do is first I'm going to start by rewriting it. Negative 2 over 5y is equal to 5 minus, and see those two, the minus and the negative, it's just going to become positive 3 over 10x. There are a bunch of different ways you can approach this question. You can first rearrange it if you wanted to get it into y, x, and then the constant. And then you can get rid of all the stuff in front of it. I always, and as soon as I see fractions, I like to get rid of the fractions. That's sort of my first instinct. So I'm going to go ahead and multiply with the magic number. The magic number, you look at the denominators. And so in this case, it would just be a 10 that we're going to multiply with. 10 times negative 2 is negative 20. Negative 20 divided by 5 is negative 4y. 10 times 5 is 50. 10 times 3 is 30. Divided by 10 is just 3x. I'm going to rearrange this. So it's y is equal to mx plus b. However, our y is not by itself. So how can I get rid of the negative 4 in front of the y? Marzu? Yep, I'm going to divide every single term here by negative 4. So when I do that, negative 4 divided by negative 4 is just y. 3 divided by negative 4 does not evenly go into one another, so that's going to remain a fraction. And 50 divided by 4 would just be 25, negative 25 over 2. That's our final answer in y is equal to mx plus b form. And so from here, the question is asking us for what is the y-intercept and the slope. When it's in this form, it's very straightforward. You just read off the numbers. So whatever is attached to the x is the slope. And whatever is the constant is your y-intercept. All right. The next part we're going to talk about is how do you find the slope of a line? And there are actually 4 very handy ways that we can figure out the slope of a line. I don't know where it went. Oh, I think it scrolled up. Maybe scroll up a little bit more. Okay, I'm going to just pause this. I lost my... Okay, so there are 4 different ways we can find the slope. Let's begin on the right. If you have a graph, what you can do is you can find 2 points, make a little triangle, and use rise over run. That's something you'd learn in middle school and then practice in grade 9. The second way is the other 2 ways are what we've just learned. If something is in standard form, you just use the formula m is equal to negative a over b. If something is in slope-intercept form, you just read off the number beside the x. And then here's a formula that might seem familiar to you. If you have 2 points, you can use the formula m is equal to y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Let's try an example of that formula. So calculate the slope of the line going through D, which is a half comma 4, and F, which is negative 2 comma 1 over 3. So I begin by, first, I will actually just rewrite the points and label them. So I have a half comma 4, and I have -2 comma 1 over 3. And the way I do this is I pick one of my points and I call it x1 and y1, and I pick the other point and I label it x2 and y2. Doesn't matter which one you label 1 and 2, you just have to remember to be consistent. So if you name one of them x1, then the y that's accompanying it has to be a 1 as well. Okay, we begin with our formula, which is, I don't know where I should write it, maybe here. M is equal to y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And now you're just going to plug in your points, being really, really careful of all the fractions and things like that. So y2, and I picked a really hard example for this one. I mean, you can do easier examples with like whole positive numbers, but we're going right into fractions with negatives. So 1 over 3 minus y1 is 4. I'm just going to make it a 4 over 1. All over, and if you like, I'm really into brackets. I use brackets a lot. So I'm just gonna put brackets around my numerator. Absolutely not necessary. It just helps me keep like the numbers together. And then x2 is -2 over 1 minus x1 is a half. And really the key to solving this question is you have to treat the numerator and denominator completely separately, and you need to solve each one of those fractions separately. So we're going to find a common denominator here by multiplying this by 3 and multiplying the 4 by 3 as well. And then in the bottom, we're going to multiply this by 2 and multiply the numerator by 2. So we end up with 1 over 3 minus 12 over 3 divided by -4 over 2 minus 1 over 2. One minus 12 is -11 over 3. And now I think it's a little bit easier to write it horizontally. So instead of making it a fraction, I'm just going to use the division sign. -4 minus 1 is -5 over 2. Have I lost anyone, or are you guys okay? I'll just pause here for a second. Okay, to finish this off, we're going to have -11 over 3 times 2 over -5. Nothing cross reduces, so we're just going to be left with 22 over 15 as our final answer. All right, no questions, so I'm going to keep going. Question number 2, determine the slope of the line graphed here. So for a question like this, what we're going to do is we're going to choose 2 points that we can see very, very clearly on the grid. And often, if you have points on the actual X and Y axes, try to pick those. Yep. The answer was 22 over 15. Now, you could pick those points and do the formula and stuff like that, but I'm going to choose to use my formula rise over run. So in a question like this, I'm going to make a little triangle. And then the formula is slope is equal to rise over run. I cheat for questions like this. I don't worry about the positive or negative signs. I know the line is going down, so my slope has to be negative. I just look at the numbers. So I'm going to cheat again and do that. My rise, you're starting at 0 and going all the way to 6. My run, I'm starting at 0 and going all the way to 2. And so my final slope is just going to be -3. I just counted. So in this graph, this is the rise over here. I just literally counted up the units. And then for run, I counted across. For the next question, let's challenge ourselves and try, is this solutions? Oh, let's challenge ourselves and try to change that to standard form to find the slope. So changing it to standard form is very straightforward. We just move the 9 to the other side. It's going to be 3x minus 5y minus 9 is equal to 0. And you'll remember from our previous example, to find the slope, it's just negative a over b. Keeping in mind that this is your a value, this is your b value, and this is your c value. So we're going to have negative 3 over negative 5. And that just becomes 3 over 5. What's that? For question number 4, it says determine the slope of the line given y is equal to negative 4 over 7x plus 5. What is the easiest way to solve this question? The easiest way to find the slope of this? Yeah, it's just the m, and so you would just read it off, and the slope would just be negative 4 over 7. Okay, homework practice are the following questions. So go ahead and just take a picture of these, you guys at home. That's question number 1. And then these are questions 2 and 3. All right, types of slopes. We have 4 types of slopes. If a line is going up, it's positive. If it's going down, it's negative. If it's going horizontal, it's 0. And if it's going vertical, it's undefined. I don't think I need to say much more about that. That's just what it is. Parallel and perpendicular lines. If 2 lines are parallel, they have the exact same slope. If 2 lines are perpendicular, they have something called negative reciprocal slopes. Let's just talk about that for a second. So if I tell you the slope of the first line is 5, the negative reciprocal slope of that would just be, you flip the numbers around. So technically a 5 is a 5 over 1. So it'll become 1 over 5. And if this number is positive, you just add a negative. Those are called negative reciprocals. Another example is if I gave you something like negative 1 over 8, the negative reciprocal slope of that is flip the numbers around. So it'll become 8 over 1. And you change the sign, it would just be a whole number 8. Okay, horizontal, vertical lines. So I use these 2 little acronyms, I guess, to talk about horizontal and vertical lines. A horizontal line goes like this. And the way you figure out the equation is you look at what axis it's going through and what number it's going through. So this blue line right here, it's going through the y-axis at the number 3. And so the equation of it would be y is equal to 3. For the vertical line, again, it's going through the x-axis and it's going through it at negative 2. So the formula would just be x is equal to negative 2. And then the acronyms, books and Hoy, everyone always laughs when I say that. Vertical lines have an undefined slope and the formula is always x is equal to a number. Horizontal lines always have a 0 slope and the formula is always y is equal to a number. So let's go ahead. Oh, actually there is no class practice. So I'll just leave this homework practice for you guys to try. Make a star at home. You guys can take a picture of it. Can you believe that for one day? How to graph a line. There are 3 different methods to graph a line. The first one is table of values. So if I were to give you a formula like y is equal to, I wanted a highlighter. Y is equal to negative 3x plus 4. You would make a table of values where you have an x column and a y column. And you can pick any numbers you want for the x column. I tend to always pick negative 2, negative 1, 0, 1, and 2. And the reason is those numbers are small. You'll get a couple of negatives and a couple of positives. And then really all you're doing for these types of questions is you're doing a lot of substitution. So for the first one, y is equal to negative 3. And for the first part, our x is negative 2. So I'm going to plug in the negative 2 there, plus 4. And I'm just going to solve that. So negative 3 times negative 2 is 6. 6 plus 4 is 10. And that is what we're going to put under the y of our table of values. And then you do this 5 more times. If you can just do it in your head, then by all means, go ahead. That would probably save you a little bit of time. So I did the first two where it says rough work, and then the rest of it, I kind of just, it's pretty straightforward to figure out. With our table of values, now we can plot each one of those points and then make a line. So -2, 10, -1, 7, 0, 4, 1, 1, and 2, -2. This will be good practice just graphing because we haven't really done that yet. Make sure you guys for this unit, you do have a ruler because we're going to be graphing a lot, especially after March break. And just a couple of rules about graphing. Whenever you draw a line, make sure there are arrows on both ends. And you also label the line with whatever the equation is. In this case, it's going to be y is equal to -3x plus 4. I wanted to include example number 2 because it has a fraction, and dealing with fractions is tricky because you don't want your y's to also be fractions. You want them to be nice whole numbers. So the little hint I've given you at the top is when dealing with fractions and equations, choose table values that are multiples of the denominator. That will eliminate the fraction. So I will explain what I mean by that. We are graphing y is equal to -1/4x minus 2. Do you guys see how the denominator is a 4? So when you're choosing your x values, choose multiples of 4. So 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, etc. And when you do that, what you'll notice is the fraction will disappear and you'll end up with a really nice whole number. So let's do a couple of those on the in our rough work area. Y is equal to, the first one is going to be -1/4 times -8 minus 2. That is just going to give me -1/4 times -8 is +2. 2 minus 2 is just going to be a 0. The next one is y is equal to -1/4 times -4 minus 2. That'll -1/4 times -4 is just a 1. 1 minus 2 is -1. Zeros are easy. It just eliminates the whole x term. So you'll just be left with -2. Hopefully you guys can see the trend. You're just going up by ones. So that is what our table of values is going to have. And then when I'm graphing it, -8, 0, -4, -1, 0, -2, 4, -3, and 8, -4. You use a ruler, draw a straight line, and then label it. Y is equal to -1/4x minus 2. Graphing method number 2 is when you have an equation, you just need the x and y intercept. And if you graph those, then you have the entire line. Remember, this is actually going to be really important for the rest of the unit as well. Your x-intercept can be found when you let y equal to 0, and your y-intercept can be found when you let x equal to 0. So that is a super important concept. Let's try it with this example here. So I have 3x minus 4y is equal to 12. To find the x-intercept, what I'm going to do is I'm going to let y equal to 0, and then I'm going to solve. So 3x minus 4 times 0 is equal to 12. Okay, then it's going to be the 0 just disappears. 3x is equal to 12, and x is going to be equal to 4. And so that coordinate is going to be 4, 0. Because every x-intercept and y-intercept needs a specific coordinate. And to figure it out, if you've let y equal to 0, That means whatever you find for x, you just pair it up with the 0. For the y-intercept, I'm going to let x equal to 0, and I'm going to do the same thing. So 3 times 0 minus 4y is equal to 12, minus 4y is equal to 12, and y is equal to negative 3. What would be the coordinate in this case? It would be 0, comma, negative 3. Is that a good enough line, I wonder? No, I'm unhappy with it. Let's try it again. Oh, I don't know what just happened here. Oh dear. Okay, one more time. Oh, it's just not lining up. Okay, that's the best I can do. And then don't forget to label your line. In this case, it would just be 3x minus 4y is equal to 12. Practice questions for this are right over here. You guys, graphing method number 3 involves the slope and the y-intercept. And again, in grade 9, when we did this, it was like a lot of moving around. So when the top number in your slope is a positive, you move up. When the top number in the slope is negative, you move down. When the bottom number in your slope is positive, you move to the right. And when it's negative, you move to the left. So when I give you a question like graph 10x is equal to 20 plus 5y using the slope and the y-intercept, the first thing you have to do is actually find the slope and the y-intercept. We could do either method. So let's go ahead and for this one, change it to standard form so we can get some practice doing that. So I'm going to convert this equation into standard form, which would just be moving the 5y over and moving the 20 over. My slope is negative a over b. And my y-intercept is negative c over b. And what that means is that coordinate is going to be, for the y-intercept, you let x equal to 0. So that coordinate is 0, comma, negative 4. How are we going to graph this? Well, the y-intercept tells you your starting point, and the slope tells you which way you're going to go. So a slope of 2 over 1 means, actually, I'm just going to write it in a different color because I think that's a little hard to see. A slope of 2 over 1 means this is your rise and this is your run. You're going to be moving up 2 units and 1 unit to the right. And the starting point is going to be at 0, comma, negative 4. So you start at your y-intercept, which is 0, comma, negative 4. And then your slope tells you move up 2 units and 1 unit to the right, and you make a point. Up 2 units, 1 unit to the right, up 2, 1 right, up 2, 1 right. And then I usually just follow the trend until the very end of my grid paper. And then you're probably wondering, yeah, I can see the trend, but what about the other side? You can actually rewrite the slope of 2 over 1 as negative 2 over negative 1, because both of those reduce to give you a whole number 2. And now in this case, the rise tells you to go down and the run tells you to go to the left. So you're just going to continue the trend over here, starting at 0, comma, negative 4, down 2, 1 to the left, down 2, 1 to the left, down 2, 1 to the left. You've made enough points now. You just have to put them together. As close as possible. And then you're just going to label your line. I just use whatever is in the question. So 10x is equal to 20 plus 5y, or if you want, you rearrange it. For this example, we have graph -1/3y is equal to x minus 2. I'm going to change this to y is equal to mx plus b form because it just seems like it will be pretty straightforward to do that. So -1/3y is equal to x minus 2. I'm going to multiply by, I'm actually going to multiply by -3 so I can get rid of the negative and the 3. So -3 times -1 is +3. +3 divided by 3 is just 1y. -3 times x is -3x. -3 times -2 is +6. So in this example, our slope is -3/1, and our y-intercept is a 6. And every y-intercept has an x value of 0. So it's going to be 0, 6. Okay, so to graph this line, you're going to start at 0, 6. A slope of -3/1. So I'm just going to write this over here. -3/1 means you're going down 3, 1 to the right. And the other way to think about it is 3/-1, where you're going up 3, 1 to the left. So I'll start with the first one, down 3, 1 to the right. 1 to the right, down 3, 1 to the right, down 3, 1 to the right, down 3, 1 to the right. And then up 3, 1 to the left. And I guess this one, I'm just going to write it as y is equal to -3x plus 6. Okay, I'm going to stop here, and you guys can go ahead and try all the practice questions throughout that we did. The equation of the line, we can worry about that later because that topic is a lot more intense. And I think we've done a lot for today. Okay, so I'm just going to stop this recording.